Welcome to the In-Betwixt and In-Between. This is Leadership Limbo, a podcast aimed at helping middle managers and their supervisors embrace the discomfort and power of leading themselves and others in the midst of it all. We blend real insight with practical tools to help you lead with self-awareness, purpose, and influence wherever you are on your leadership journey. I'm Josh Hugo, one of your co-hosts, joined today by my good friend and other co-host, John Clark. John, happy Friday. Different recording day today for us.
I know we're all over the place with multiple recordings this week. So I feel like I'm in this big, speaking of limbo in this time frame, because I don't want to talk about the other podcast we recorded because that's going to come out after this one. And so that's all messy. So we're really getting into the limbo-ness of time right now. And what is it? And does it flow in a linear progression?
I don't know. Are we getting into that? Sure. Let's do it. Business is booming in the leadership limbo world. We're daily recordings for the last 2 days straight.
Yeah, 2 consecutive days of recordings.
2 consecutive days, but you could turn that into a LinkedIn post of just like consecutive recording days, 100% back to back. Just whatever mystical statistics somehow generate the algorithm on there. So that's on both of our minds this week. If any of you listen to this and you're on LinkedIn, the algorithm is a constant source of anxiety for folks who try to build business off that site.
Yeah, 100% increase in product this week. We'll say that it's been 100% increase in our podcast product. That'll be a good post.
Yeah. It's truly. And if we don't do it 1 week and then we do it the next week, that's 1/0. That's an indefinite, undefined amount of like we are literally. Yeah. Anyways, we're going down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, undefined or infinite, one or the other. So
well, here we are. We're back. John, remind us what we talked about last week.
Yeah. So we, in our most recent podcast, talked about presence and the importance of that. And certainly our banter there indicates that we're in need of some presence right now, just like getting in the moment and being in the moment. But we really defined what it was. I think really talked about a lot of threads within that, but really, I think the idea of presence is about the other. I really think that's what we came down on to summarize a lot of our points. We talked about you can be present in terms of being big or having a big personality or asserting yourself, but presence is really awareness, right? It's awareness of others, awareness of their needs, but also understanding how that kind of flows within your team and through your team, and you're a part of that as well. So we really define that. We gave some examples of what it is and what it isn't, and hopefully you can go back and kind of listen to those and get some ideas for what I want this to look like, or what I definitely don't want it to look like, or what I might call presence but actually isn't. And then today, really excited that we're going to get into, well, what gets in the way of presence? What are the things that stop people from being present and having this kind of connected relationship to the people that they're with when they're leading them, because there's a lot of reasons why. And even I think most people would say they want presence. They believe in that. But there's always just things that get in the way, even amidst good intentions. And we want to give you some strategies for achieving that. So a real continuation of last time. I think with that, I want to talk about the kind of homework we left you with. And that was really about asking yourself, what is something you need to be more present to, more attuned with in terms of your presence? And we said it could really take 2 forms. One could be a priority that you have that is just slipping away from you. You aren't focusing on it. You aren't giving it the attention it needs. And so you need to build presence towards that priority, right? The second one is more about people. Who is a person you need to be more present to? Maybe you feel disconnected from them, or you feel like you're not understanding how they're working right now. And maybe you've been more upset at them and explaining in a way like, oh, they're being defiant or they don't care about the work. But if you bring a real presence to them, you might really try to understand, well, what's going on for them. And so whether it was the priority or the person, we hope you have that person or that priority in mind today as we get into the things that might be getting in the way and strategies you could employ as well. Josh, anything to add to that? And if not, do you want to take us into the discussion?
Yeah, thanks, John. Good. My mind was thinking about the homework, actually. The first part was even going back to that David White essay and the idea of like time really slowing down. So I've been trying to think about, and I need to be better at asking this, but it's kind of hard to ask somebody, did time slow down when we were just talking? That feels a little almost egotistical of sorts, but the essence of that question and that sort of frame of, am I being really present? Am I paying attention to this person or the clock? So I've really been trying to do it across multiple interactions. And I've been reflecting, even, yesterday I spoke at some convention and I was talking with a few people afterwards and looking for my mouse and this and that. I'm like, let me just set that aside with this person with their 45 seconds of having a chance to talk with me, feel that presence. And so honestly, I think it's been a really helpful frame for me in the last few weeks. And I really need to continue to emphasize doing this presence for myself and presence for my family before I think about presence for those I work with. And so my kids and Lindy, I think are two spaces that I've really tried to focus on. Do you want to answer that too for yourself? Even what's the homework that you've thought about in the last week
Yeah.
or so?
I mean, a couple micro examples. I think when I think about the priority, I'm working on a project with a colleague around wanting to host a hiring event.
Hmm.
It's been on my radar, but man, I put it on my calendar and then I do other things to avoid it. I do things that don't matter. And I think it's just because it's a lot of tactical work right now, that I'm
Yeah.
just trying to avoid. But man, I think if I thought about that more from like, I want to be present to this because I know what the outcome that can be good for others and certainly for our businesses if we do it. Perhaps that's a different framing that I haven't actually, but the learning I haven't brought to it. The other ones with people, I agree with you. Because we've been talking about this, I've been thinking about more. But even today, I had a coaching kickoff with a person, and it was really great. I do a lot of things to set up my presence in coaching. I don't type. I just have a little notepad to write things. If the person allows for it, I use a transcriber to record them so I can come back to our conversation rather than trying to write everything down. But I know I missed an opportunity with him. He talked about being stuck and feeling that way, kind of related to his personal life, but he said sometimes he brings that into work and he says, well, what's the point of this all? And I remember this now. I look back, I said, I hear you. Yeah. But I was ready to move on to a point in the conversation we needed to do in terms of like something that was kind of logistical to it. And I really missed an opportunity to dig in on with him with like, well, what do you mean by that? You know what I mean? And
Mm,
asking that question. So
yeah.
it didn't throw off the conversation, but as a coach, it's something I realized that, man, I could have really, if I'd been so present that I wasn't thinking about the next thing,
Yeah.
we would have dug in on that, and that could have made a bigger impact, right? So, yeah, a
Yeah.
couple of things for me as well, and I'm sure we can all think of those micro or big moments where our lack of presence got in the way as well.
Yeah, I think that reflection part of this is also good to really think about. So I think today we're going to talk more about what are the things that gets in the way, and I think that's a nice segue into that space. And I actually just wrote about, like, it's interesting how when you start paying attention to themes in the universe, themes kind of pop up in these patterns. And so the idea of this presence uh focus in our podcast the last few weeks was something you came up to me with, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, John. And I was like, that's really fascinating because I was in the middle of writing this blog that I have on Substack. It's yeah, josh482.substack.com. I didn't realize I could have probably written my whole name into it, but yeah, Josh482. So if you do want to read more about what I thought about presence, but I'll pull some of that um into this podcast today. But yeah, the first place I would start, what I was really thinking about, and this is the uncomfortable part of this kind of work, is that there isn't an easy answer to your presence. It can't just be superficial. And I'm going to actually take this in a direction I was just talking about with a person today, and it actually ties really well with Andrew Robinson's comments from a few weeks ago, which I would highly recommend you listen to that podcast. But I was thinking about like when in growing up and learning and being part of organizations that train and develop you. I think one of the visual images I had of like what that process often looks like is this idea that, picture this onion. We often talk about peeling back layers, but how often are the solutions that we try to apply to challenges in life, not about peeling back the layers, but about adding a new layer. Like, all right, well, to add to have presence, to have executive presence, you need to, look this way and walk in with this sort. Like, it's a lot of surface level solutions,
I
and
mean,
it's almost
charisma.
adding
It's like that
charisma.
charisma. We talked about that.
uh,
Yeah. Mhm.
and so it's almost like the thought that bubbled up in a conversation I had earlier today is that a lot of what we seem to be doing in the work of bettering ourselves is actually adding another layer of the surface. Like, it's literally the definition of superficial, and I don't mean superficial in a cheap or kind of, like, meaningless way, but it's like, to solve this challenge of building presence, what you need to do, like, here's the 10 checklist types of ways of doing it. It actually is about peeling the layers back, and that goes to Andrew's comment about de-envelopment, this idea of literally, like, true development, true improvement comes from peeling back what's getting in the way. And I think that the concept of your anxiety, your response when the pressure goes up, the insecurities that might exist, the postures that we take in response to emotional reactivity in the midst of a system, whether it be a work system, a family system, a friendship, that that sort of anxious reactivity to whatever it is that might be causing the pressure to rise slightly is absolutely going to get in the way of presence. And that's a hard one to solve for because that's not about, oh, be less anxious. You actually have to start peeling back these layers to be able to figure out where that's coming from.
Yeah. Couple things here. I got a side quest for us. One, every time we talk about peeling back onions, I just think about Shrek. Ogres are like onions. They got layers. And the donkey's like, oh, you mean if you leave them out in the sun too long, they spoil and rot and all that stuff. He's like, no, they have layers. And so do parfaits. So don't forget about parfaits have layers
Ooh,
also.
I
So,
haven't had a parfait in a
um,
while.
um, no, yeah, I like the de-envelopment one. I want to take us back because I think what Josh really started to get us into is we want to talk about some things that actually get in the way of presence. And the first thing, just to stamp it, that Josh started to talk about was your own insecurity and your own anxiety, right?
Hmm.
So just want to stamp that's the first thing
Yeah. And I
is you
took
spend a
that.
lot of time thinking about
Yeah.
myself. How am I presenting right now? How are people thinking about me?
Yeah.
And instead, how can you get past that and think about how am I showing up for this other person?
Yeah.
How do they see me responding to them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Let me play. So let me come up with some more concrete example here. Um, this drives from some of the Bowen family theory systems we've talked about in the past. When anxiety goes up, and this could tie to maybe what you did as a kid. So, for example, one of the postures you might take when there's anxiety at home is an over functioning versus under functioning posture, and that's something we've talked about earlier with like rescue or victim. But when you sense that there may be a little bit of trouble in paradise, a little disharmony on a team, one of the things that I know I can do, and I've probably even done it on this podcast, I know I've done it in my relationships, is I take on this over functioning posture, which is experienced by somebody else as over explaining something. I'm a little less comfortable with quiet. I don't stand fully behind my statement. I have to try to maybe add 2 bullet points into it to justify it. And that is often an over-functioning response to say, "Well, I feel out of control in this anxious moment, so the way for me to really try to mitigate any potential discomfort is to really jump in with a lot more." And I think some people lean towards that side of it. And that's just one posture to take, is that over functioning, over explaining is a real manifestation of hyper or over functioning. So that's just one example. And I know it affects presence.
Yeah,
What
it
do you
makes
think
me
about that? Yeah.
well, I think it can't that can be I think I've said this a bunch of times on this podcast, but the hustling for your worth. I think over explaining can be a form. Now, sometimes hustling for your worth is just I'm going to do everything. I'm going to to pick up the slack for people. I'm going to complete things for them. So it is a little bit of that rescuer. I also think it's like, well, I want to explain it until I get affirmation from people that, oh yeah, this is great. I needed you to explain that to me, Josh. Um,
Hmm.
when, in reality, maybe they didn't need that. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
definitely see for me how that plays out in terms of a hustling for my worth sort of thing. It's, well, if I come up with the right way to put this and the perfect way to explain it, then they'll get it. I've experienced that as a manager. certainly experienced it in my relationship with my wife and my kids.
Hmm.
And as a coach, and that's what, as a coach, I think it's allowed me to lean into more of like, you have to watch out for that because bad coaches explain too much, right? Because that's your only job is to get that other person. Because often you
Hmm.
don't work with that person, you don't go into work with them. So when I was their manager, I could kind of help fix it or take control, which wasn't good. But as a coach, if that's your goal, then you're going to fail because you don't spend any time with that person other than the time you get to coach with them most of the time, right? So yeah, it's a I agree. I think that in some ways is not the counter to that is the second one, which is consistent deference or kind of unwillingness to stand in your principles. So versus this idea of I'm going to over explain or really try to convince you of something, it's I'm just going to defer to you or I'm not really willing to stand in my own principles or take a stand on it. I'll let you take that, Josh. How does that get in the way of presence?
Yeah,
Because
that's
we
a good
talk we
question.
because some people might think like, well, if presence is always about understanding people and connecting with them, then wouldn't your like deference to them be a sign of that? But not necessarily. I'd love to get your thoughts on that and take it away from there.
Yeah, great question, John. I think that to just zoom out for a second, I actually think another way to think about presence is to be able to be a highly self differentiated person, right? Which is to stand amidst and observe the challenges around you, the anxiety, the conflicts, the relational dynamics, and
Right.
not exit it, not come in like a grenade launcher and try to blow it all up. That's another posture is like engage in conflict and force your way through it. But it's to be able to say, I know that these postures, so over functioning or under functioning or engaging in conflict or distancing. Now, distancing is what this one's about.
Yeah, that's
Consistent
right.
deferencing is like, well, if I don't actually have to take a stand, if I can just defer and facilitate, I will know for any of my colleagues and friends who listen to this, this is a place that I actively have to work on. Is like sometimes you can over facilitate and actually understate or frankly just not state what you believe is the right thing to do. And that is a form of distancing in response. It's probably again coming from I keep using this word, but a posture, often in our subconscious, pseudo self, if you will, that we take on when anxiety shows up. And it's like, well, if I don't actually say, would you buy this product? And they don't end up buying it, well, I don't have to experience that rejection,
Yep.
right? If I don't say this is the choice we made as a team, maybe the impact is actually quite negative, but you would say, well, I never chose that. So you almost create a little bit of a pre-made excuse. So this is a distancing posture as opposed to like an over-functioning one. So that's how I would kind of answer your question. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton to add. I think that's really good, and I love this idea of distancing. When you said that, I was like, aha, yeah, that's what this is. That's when people fall back on it. The only thing as you're talking, I thought about decision fatigue. People get in this moment where I'm tired of making decisions or I'm afraid, maybe I'm afraid to go back to like a wall of self-preservation. I'm actually afraid to do it, but I'm just
Yeah.
going to call it being tired. And, or any number of things, or, hey, we've entered a really complex season in our work. We got this new initiative, or we've got this month is busy for a particular reason. And I'm exhausted and we're just going to make it through and I'm going to distance myself and you do what you do to kind of achieve or achieve the thing to a certain degree, but through the process, like you just become like a robot getting through things versus no, we're going to stay connected. We're going to stay present. We're going to hear each other. I had a guy I'm working with and he did the opposite of that. They've entered a particular busy time. They took on this new residential facility that they didn't really anticipate happening so soon. And he just started this work 6 months ago, but you know what? He has led that so well and so connected to others. And, one of his coworkers came to him and said, "Hey, I want to tell you, this is a lot right now." And she didn't say it in a way of like, you're asking too much of us, just like, "Hey, I'm glad we're doing this work." It almost was like, "I'm glad we're doing this work together, but and I know you know this, but it's a lot." He said, "I know, but we're gonna get through it." That's because he's been present to people throughout the process. He's stayed grounded in what's our mission, our purpose, our norms. And sometimes when you get busy, you're like, no, we're just going to get away from all of that and we're just going to get tactical and we're just going to get strategic and we're just going to move and get it done with. You kind of forget, what's it mean to stay connected and not distance ourselves from the internal work and understanding of each other, right? So,
Yeah, that's a
yeah.
great example, and
Yep.
actually, it reminds me of another example. I know I shared that video with you just yesterday. I don't know if you watched it, but it was a video of Mike Vrabel, the head coach of the Patriots, after they lost the Super Bowl just last week, and he was standing in the tunnel or the hallway in front of the, team's locker room, and he literally stood out there for every single person who was either first out of the field or off the field, the last person on the field, and just shook hands, said thank you for the work that you've done. We're gonna get better. We're gonna feel this disappointment as a team. And he would talk to his captains. He would talk, and he was present, and he wasn't sitting there blowing smoke up people's butt about what was going to get better and what was going to be different. But he acknowledged the moment, and he was physically there, which I think we'll get to in a little bit of a minute, of like the physical importance of presence, which is also at the same rate not always a solution to being present, is just being around. But it was a really cool video. Not a Patriots fan by any stretch, but if you want to Google that, if you are interested in just good examples of leadership in motion, I would say check out that like Mike Vrabel post Super Bowl video.
I'm pretty impressed by Mike. I don't like the Patriots either, but I'm pretty impressed by Mike Vrabel,
Yeah, good
in
leader.
terms of how he is. So, well, let's talk about the grenade one because actually think that fits in the next one a little bit here because I like that image as well. Having your own agenda, like I'm not interested in others. I'm going to come in here and kind of bull rush things and get things done. In some ways, that almost feels like the most present a person can be. Like, whoa, they just came in and lit this room on fire. Um,
Mm,
and certainly I don't think we shy away from like good leaders point to what the outcomes are and they tell the team we're going to get there and they multiply the team's ability to get there, but what we're imagining here isn't quite like that. It's a little bit more of, like you said, the grenade. um
yeah.
Lead us through that one, Josh. Like, why? And we might want to get through these next couple ones a little bit quicker, but
Yeah, yeah.
what is it about this setting your own agenda, not interested in others, that's real problematic here?
Yeah, I think the last two we'll get to are pretty quick. So this one here, the idea of having your own agenda is is another form of over functioning, right? So in one hand, it's almost like the over explaining, but that one comes across as a little bit more skittish. This one comes across as a little bit more like, I don't got time for everyone's shit here. I'm just going to come through. This is what we're going to do. And it's not, it doesn't mean you're, this is a little confusing, right? We just talked about being too deferent. There's no problem, I believe, as a leader to stand clear in a decision. But when you're in the middle of deciding an out, like what you need to do in the decision making process, in the discovery phase, if the team isn't expecting you to come in right then and there and say, this is the decision we've made because you've said, I'm going to take everyone's information. We're going to make a decision. If this is just, hey, we got a big problem in the company. Here's what we're going to do about it. I need you here. I need you here. I need you here. Any questions? I don't care. Let's run and just go with it. That's more of what this kind of gets in the way of presence. To your point, John, somebody might look at this and say, well, isn't that confidence in leadership? Yes, there's not necessarily, it's like it's the limbo, I guess is the best way to put this. Like this is one of those limbo areas. Yes, you want outcomes. You want to paint a picture of what excellence looks like. And depending on the context and what you're trying to solve together, if you just come in and cut out everyone's input and everyone's voice, you either have to have a very good reason to say, I don't actually think we can listen to anyone else here. And I don't know which reasons would even exist for that most of the time, or you need to slow down and say, I have a plan, but I need your help in making sure this plan is ready to go. And I think that's a present leader. The first version's less so.
Yeah. The book Multipliers is I just finished it. It does a great job of really explaining this tension, I think.
Mm.
Like how good leaders hold the tension of like leading the team strongly and effectively and having high expectations for them, but like helping others to feel that they're as much a part of the process as the leader themselves is, right? So I think to your point about decision making, there's a difference between I'm willing and able and not afraid to make decisions, and I am the only one who makes every decision. Those are
Hmm.
very different,
Yeah,
right?
well said.
Same for input. It's one thing to say, I take input, it's clear how I use that in making decisions. It's another to either I don't take input, only my input matters, or only the input of a few matters. And then we'll make a decision based on that. Those are very different things, right?
Mhm.
And um, anyway, I just think like there are very rare times where that sort of leadership is needed. I think they occur, but they're in moments of real severe crisis
That's a good
or
example.
endangerment. Like they exist and they do and they matter. And then sometimes in those moments, people are like, "Wow, I'm glad we had that person to lead us through. It was intense, but without them, we wouldn't have made it through." But that's not every moment, and even those leaders know when it's the right time to go that mode and when it's not. So if you're only leading that way, you're probably not present to your team. You're not multiplying their abilities. You're not getting the best out of folks. Um, if you're leading that way, hopefully it's just this one off in kind of a real, chaotic or complex situation. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
that's a good description. Last two of things that I think there's more, but I think two that we'll discuss briefly today that get in the way of presence. Distractions. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for it. It's not always even in response to anxiety. It could just be a lack of mindfulness in the moment. But I was talking with somebody the other day, and I know I've done this myself, but it's so easy to tell when somebody else doesn't really care what you have to say. Is they're kind of like looking off in the distance, looking over your shoulder, who's moving around. Like, that's just such a presence killer. It's just almost instantaneous of like, I've asked you a question and then you start talking. I'm like looking over your shoulder. I'm like, I just stopped talking. I'm like, okay, I think this conversation's over. And it could be distractions by just the environment. It could be your phone coming out. It could be on your computer. But if you are distracted when you're really trying to create and demonstrate your presence with somebody else, it's going to get in the way.
I'm laughing a little bit. I think about when I go out to eat with my wife. And
TVs.
this has been what?
I was going to say TVs around you. I would
That's exactly it. So
that's me too.
it used to be, especially if you went to a sports bar and there's a sports event on, I might just like be poking at it. And it's been a while since we did, but now like basically I orient myself with my back to TV so I don't have that. And it's, she didn't complain too much. And obviously if there's something worth watching, then we'll watch it. But for the most part, if it's just like some random NBA game that I'm just distracted by watching like people run up and down a court, I just turn my back to it and I just sit in the seat that puts me furthest away from that distraction. And I think I mentioned this one on here. I think this is something everyone needs to think about. I love the Simon Sinek video where he's talking about people and their phones. And a lot of times in conversations, people take out their phone if you're sitting with someone and they put it on the table. Face down, face up, doesn't really matter. That in and of itself signals like a lack of presence because this thing matters to me. I have to have it out. I keep mine in my pocket. Even when like right now we're podcasting, I keep it in my pocket. I don't pay attention to it. I don't look at it. And I'm not good. I'm terrible with my phone. I want to be clear. I'm like no saint of phone usage here, but it's just certain moments I know how to put it away. And so strategies to keep yourself away from those is really important because there's a ton of distractions in our world more than there ever have been. So,
I
yep,
agree.
yep.
Last one, we don't have to sit on too long here, but physical elements do matter. So, what gets in the way of presence? Well, first of all, not being around, right?
Yeah,
Like, if
you
you
do have to be around.
disappear when the pressure's up and when the team needs you, you
Yep.
brought up crisis a moment ago. Like, I was just completely blown away by this guy, the Washington Post CEO. I'm not trying to talk too much smack about him, but apparently they just released 30% of their team last week, 30% of their entire organization. He wasn't even on the call. And then afterwards made some sort of like generic difficult decisions were made, sort of, and then he resigned because that's just abdication in my opinion of leadership. So first of all, what gets in the way of presence is not being around when you need to be. A good example of when you should be, if you've set out a change initiative, you've given some expectations, you've named what you want to see, make sure you're going out and looking for it. If you say, hey, team, we really want to be safe on the front lines today, out on the field, we're going to work on this new protocol. Everyone has to wear their goggles and their hard hats at all times. If you say that and you're around looking for it and saying thank you, that's a great win. And if nobody is looking for it, that's a good example of where you're missing presence. Tone and body language matter too. I think just showing people that you're physically engaged, the active listening piece, ties a little bit to the distractions piece. So I just want to name physical does matter. There's a lot of nuance to what I mean when it comes to body language, et cetera. So John, what would you add to that?
Well, I just in terms of being aware of how you're presenting yourself physically and in your tone, because some of this isn't only about you being present for others, but like things you're doing to signal to them that you're inviting them to be present to you as well. We haven't really talked about that, but if my if my persona and my tone and my body language is already indicating to this person like to be on guard and to be um worried, they can't be present. They can't hear, we can't collaborate. They can't hear my questions as any more than curiosity. They're going to hear them as assaults on them and accusations, right? So there's a little bit of this of how you do that invites presence as well. Don't forget. Possibly a topic for another time, but to that point, it's a two-way street on the physical, the tone, that sort of thing as well. So, yeah,
And yeah, tone definitely matters. And
yeah,
so, yeah, good
yeah.
stuff there.
Well, why don't let's get going on. We have some strategies to achieve this. We got some great ones here. We'll take a minute or so on each one. But I'll start us with one, which is I talked a lot with people about how you build your priorities in a week or in a month or whatever it looks like as a leader is really important. Often, though, these priorities are very much about like, what am I getting done this week? What needs to get done? And that makes a lot of sense. I think a really present person, though, not only list those priorities, but what are the things I'm going to learn this week? What am I going to
Well, I like
find
that.
out?
Yeah,
You know
that's
what I mean? Like, instead of saying, oh, I'm going to execute my, this step back meeting with my team, it might be framed better with, in our step back this week, I'm going to learn X, Y, and Z. So now the priority is about how am I engaging in curiosity in this step back meeting to learn more, to then like move forward with action for sure. But it's not just about I'm going to run a meeting, it's I'm going to learn this in the meeting. And so, how do we build our priorities again, not just around uh, what what has to happen on the agenda and like what do we have to get done, but about what do I need to learn this week? What do I need to find out?
mm.
Right. That invites more presence. It sets you up to be more curious and you reach that outcome in a different way than when it's just like do this thing. So
How much of that's
that's what I do.
calling your shot? I like that. It's not that doesn't just sound like internal. That sounds like you're suggesting saying that to your team or both.
Well, both. I actually think that leads into the second one here, which is the second one here is a little bit about like naming your intention for others, right? And so, but that can be, hey, that can be as big as team. I want to practice my presence. And one way I'm going to do that is by listening more, right? As an example. Um, that means I don't want to cut you off as much as I have. So I need you to call me out if I cut you off, because I know I have a bad habit of that. Or if I respond to something you say and it's clear I didn't hear everything you said, let's call me out on that. I mean, it can be as big as that. But also, yeah, to your point, if you say, hey, we're going to have this meeting, but the purpose of the meeting is to learn this collectively, it's to get everybody's point of view on this. I think most time we frame meetings of like, we will finish this by the end of the meeting. Hopefully you will, but I think it has to be combined with what will we learn, share, and what new perspective will we get. So yeah, I think naming those things is very important. I mean, even for me, I would often like make my calendar for the week and I would post it somewhere or share it with others. And what a difference it would make to others if my priorities weren't just like execute these 5 things, but also it was learn these things or understand these things better or something like that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
The intentionality is what jumps out with what
Yeah.
you're saying is that I do think presence comes from demonstrating both literally and maybe less outwardly the intentionality in which you're showing up for
Yeah.
people. I think
Totally.
that's a big way to put that one. The next couple are somewhat related, but I think I talked about it as what gets in the way is being accidental or less intentional about how we're reacting to pressure, how we're reacting to anxiety. And
Mhm. Yep.
obviously, that's a big one. We're not going to cover how to do that in just a couple of minutes here. But I do think that it's really an important question for anyone listening today to say, huh, how much is my posture that I maybe just click into because that's what I did when I was raised? That's how I grew up. That's what I continue to do. It's kind of baked into how I'm reacting at this stage of my life. How much do I need to disentangle that from my actual true self? And that's a lot of stuff out there. I could recommend books. We've talked about growing yourself up. I think internal family system stuff is really great too. A lot of really important work that you need to be doing around what is the reason that you react the way that you do when things get difficult. And I think one of the very tangible recommendations I could make is I think everyone listening to this has some kind of relationship in their life that they wouldn't rate 100 out of 100 right now. And it could be your own spouse, it could be your kids. I'm not saying everything needs to be perfect, but even if it's like below an 80, a 90 out of 100, there might be some relational repair that you might be showing up to work with a lot of conflict with your employees, but that might actually start with somebody in your own family. Maybe one technique would be, what is a broken relationship I have? A relationship that needs repair, and what actions can I take to help repair that? And that starts with you taking accountability for your part of that. So I do think presence is impacted by relationships that are being strained. So I would
Right.
love to hear your reaction to
Well,
that.
I love your idea of scaling it 0 to 100, and just think of it this way too. We wanna begin to repair things when they're at 75, not when they're at 25. Like, and that's also just about handle conflict when it comes. I mean, that's good. That's true for a leader. Like, let's
Great
repair it
point.
now. Let's address this now. I think you're right. Nothing's ever 100, but let's keep everything above an 80. Let's keep everything
Yeah,
above an 85.
that's
And
right.
so the moment it dips below that, well, let's get that right now. Let's not wait till that deteriorates to a point that it's at 30 or 20. And man, the work we're gonna have to do to get it back up to 80 is gonna be immense, right? So ask yourself that now and don't think, well, it's good enough for now. Think, no, what I gotta do to get it closer to 90, right? So
Yeah, I
I
love
do
that.
love that framing. Yeah,
That's a great number kind of perspective, and yeah, it's affecting your presence. It
totally. Yeah.
absolutely is, and start somewhere. The next part is a little bit tied to that too. I would say one of the places for the over explainers out there, myself included, is be okay with discomfort and silence. It's okay to stand as a self differentiated leader with a statement that causes others to be uncomfortable. You don't need to always emotionally accommodate that everyone in a room might not agree with what you believe. And sometimes silence and standing amidst discomfort actually enhances your presence without jumping in to rescue people from the discomfort that was created by taking a potentially difficult stance on some sort of matter. We're going to model that for our listeners.
I was gonna say, did you see what I did there?
Yeah, I did.
Or you
That
just
was
was there
good.
discomfort?
That was what is that word in radio when it's too quiet for too long?
Bad
This is
radio.
one
Just bad
space
radio.
where you don't wanna have too much quiet, but yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well
No,
done.
totally agree. I have nothing else to add to that. I think it's
Yeah,
right. And also, I'll add this. If there's not discomfort on your team, if there's not those moments, then nobody's growing. Like, you're
yeah.
not really challenging each other. You're not battling.
Artificial harmony.
Yeah, totally. I got a couple more here. I'll put these two together. If you overspeak or you're always thinking about what you will say next, which I think is a common problem, you need to speak last, especially if you're the leader. Let other people air it. Don't, be ready to speak last and maybe even then synthesize things and bring everybody's thoughts together instead of just being like, you're all wrong. Here's what we're doing. It's not that, but be willing to speak last. I love this idea that was in the book Multipliers, which is limit your poker chips. So it's literally, you might give yourself some actual physical poker chips and they represent 3 times in a meeting or in a discussion that you as the leader get to talk, especially if you overspeak. The first one might be worth 90 seconds of time. I get 90 seconds to share when I want to. The next one's worth 60 seconds and the last one's worth 30 seconds. It means you get 3 minutes of airtime to share in a meeting, especially when
I
there's
like
like
that.
not the facilitator per se, but when you're contributing and you have to be really intentional about when you want to say stuff. And it also signals to your team that like you are limiting yourself so that you don't take over. Now, that could also be good for a person who doesn't participate enough. You might be forced to participate 3 times
Okay.
to be part just to not just sit there and worry about, oh, what are people saying and am I good enough to speak? It's like, nope, you are required to step in 3 times and share something. So the idea of poker chips was a real tangible way of addressing that too. Josh, take us away on the last two here.
Yeah, I
Know
love
your
that.
content and be organized.
Yeah, I think, things that can also kill your presence is just not knowing what you're doing. That's a big one. Know your stuff. I mean, I also put on my blog, I said, it doesn't mean you have to know everything to feel confident as a leader, but you at least need to be willing to learn and, demonstrate to your team. Sometimes I don't know is the right answer, but if it's an answer you need to eventually have, come back and share that you've learned what you need to learn.
And know who to ask. Also, that doesn't mean know the finite details, but know, like, a good manager knows, like, know your content by knowing who's the right person to bring in, trust them, ask them the right questions.
Yeah.
you're building their legitimacy too. But if you're just like, who's even doing this thing? You sound like an
Right.
idiot. So don't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, know the resource, like, be a resource savvy, right? Like, great leaders don't have to have all the answers, but they do, as especially if you're in an organization intertwined in kind of a complex space, start identifying the people that you need to have relationship with who can help you get those answers. But knowing your content, obviously, in addition to adaptive skills that we've been talking about, pretty critical, very critical. The last one is tied to that too. It's being organized.
Yes.
I think that it it's yeah, I mean it's kind of just what it sounds like. Being prepared, being fastidious with certain details, recognizing that you need to show up with yourself in a position of preparedness is is really important for your credibility. So honestly, these last two
Yeah.
are the competence and credibility sides of influence that we talked about a few weeks ago. But that's also about presence too.
Yeah.
And so I don't have a whole lot more to add to
No.
either of those. John, what would you like
Well,
to close
I
us?
just the organized one, I think you're pretty organized too, but as a pretty high order and type A person, I know the challenge here for folks is like, well, of course an organized person would say that. They're so rigid in their ways that they don't like it when we're disorganized. I get that. I totally understand it. And I'm not saying like everyone has to be the same level of organization. What I am saying is if you find yourself saying like, "Oh, I'm just not an organized person. That's how I roll." You got to figure something out because it's annoying for others and you're not as present as you think you are. Like you're not as like connected, you're not understanding. You're letting there are other things that are getting in the way. You have agendas that go all over the place. There's no stamping of decisions at the end. There's no sense that you heard what everyone said because you didn't organize or structure it well enough. So if not, Josh and I are just saying think about it. Like it's really important and it does model a lot for people about how you operate. So
It sure does.
um yeah, I think this is great. I love this idea of presence and how we do it. I think hopefully what folks have taken away from us here is that this is more than just, again, just like, oh, we're floating around and we're just like taking it all in. I think there are very practical ways that this matters about being present in a way that helps actually with decision making, that helps with outcomes, that helps with people's growth and development, and helps you to become a more effective and better leader and manager of others. Right. And so don't sit here. I would encourage our audience not to think that presence is just some hokey woo woo sort of thing that we all talk about. It's, I think, really critical to actually achieving the things that we all need, right? Ties in with self-awareness, a bunch of other stuff. But please take some time in the next few weeks to really utilize one of these strategies to really think about how you're going to be more present and what that means in terms of what you're trying to learn versus just what you're trying to do, right? Other thoughts, Josh, before I take us out here?
No, mic drop.
Awesome. All right. Well, we love having you all with us. Please subscribe, download, submit questions, submit a 5-star rating, whatever it might be. Share this with your friends. We love doing this work and want to keep doing it. And until next time, this has been Leadership Limbo, where we make space for the tension and tools for the journey. See you in the in-between.